What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the extended cut, minimally edited podcast version of this week's episode. And I'm so excited that you chose to listen to the extended cut version of this episode because this week I got to interview my dear friend, Dr. Therese Mascardo. And I love that you're going to get to catch the full interview that we had together. If you're watching and not just listening, you may have noticed that it looks like I'm trapped inside of an anthropology catalog, and that's because I am staying at Dr. Teresa's house in Lisbon, and her apartment is adorable. So thank you, Therese, for hosting me. You're the best. Like, literally the best. She's the best. We talk about what inspired Dr. Therese to become a digital nomad, what it's like to practice teletherapy overseas, and just a lot of different topics that I really enjoyed touching on. So I think you're going to enjoy this episode. Well, without further ado, let's dive into this interview with Dr. Therese Mascardo of Exploring Therapy. Where do we start?
No. Where do you want to start?
Welcome back to Private Practice Skills.
Hey, great to be back.
Should we set the scene? Like, where are we right now? Who are you? Where are we? Where do we start? I don't even know.
We're friends.
Oh, yes.
Hi, I'm Dr. Therese. We're in my apartment or flat in Lisbon, Portugal. Marie's visiting me. And we met professionally. We met on Instagram in 2018 when I started a mastermind for psychologists.
Yes.
Because I was like, I don't know how to do the social media thing. I need support.
But she does know how to do the social media thing.
And then gathered a bunch of amazing women together and said, let's help each other.
Yes.
And the rest is history. So, yeah.
The first time I saw Therese's profile on Instagram, I remember telling my husband that I just knew we would get along. I just knew. And he's like, how can you tell that from Instagram? And I'm like, I just know, okay?
I'm really good at deceiving people. No, I felt the same, obviously. That's why I reached out to you. So it's a win-win.
So Therese, we're in Lisbon.
We're in Lisbon.
So you live here?
I live here.
So you
yes.
live here?
Yes.
Maybe that's like a talking point. I feel like we should probably explain that. Who are you? How did you get here? What's this? Maybe just give us like the little story of what brought you here.
Yeah. So the story is that I've been a psychologist for like 15 plus years now, and my story starts in LA, where I'm from in California, and it starts with a lot of burnout. I was seeing, I think, like 40 clients a week. I was exhausted, and at the very worst of it, I was commuting like 4 hours a day.
I can't.
4 hours a day.
Oh.
And commuting culture is hard, and it was really, really exhausting. I got completely wiped out, and I wanted something different. So I started seeing clients remotely at first. I think this was back in 2015.
Ooh, before it was cool.
Before
2015. That was back, I remember just being in circles where people are like, you really... just only in a pinch, really, is what teletherapy's for. Like,
therapists hated it. They hated the idea. I remember getting so much judgment from people being like, oh, I could never meet with a client if it wasn't face-to-face. So it started out of like a bit of necessity, but it ended up evolving into something really great because my clients loved it, I loved it, and then I was really able to improve my quality of life. Working 100% remotely, and then eventually becoming a digital nomad, and then realizing I could travel all over the world, which I have done, and now I consider Lisbon like my primary home, my main hub, and then I travel around wherever I want to. So it's really great.
Yeah, Therese is like my cool travels the world friend, and I'm just like super boring in my little like cozy suburbia bubble.
That's the biggest lie.
I live vicariously through Therese's travels all over the world. How long have you been living in Lisbon now then?
5 years. 5 years. It's so crazy. It went by so fast.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's like you caught a lot of trends before they were trendy. And I was just thinking as you were sharing, because all of this sounds, I know everyone listening is like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I want to be like Therese. And like, but you got all this pushback at the time for doing these things that were not cool yet. Like, how did you even come up with this idea of like, I'm going to go virtual, 2015 land where like no one's doing it and people are giving me pushback and like, I'm going to travel the world. Like, how did you even see those doors were available. Those were open doors that you could walk through.
Yeah, I think that part of the story actually starts much earlier than 2015. So I know you know this about my story, but one of the most significant experiences of my life was losing my brother to suicide in 2009. And so he was 25, I was just a little bit older, and I think for anyone who's lost someone, you know what a devastating experience that is, obviously. And while grief is different for everyone, for me, the way it impacted me was that it made me want to live life more, if that makes sense. And I think the thought I had at the time was like, he didn't get to make his dreams happen. And he was such a vibrant, imaginative, creative person who wanted to do so much. He was a writer, he was interested in film. And so because of this like pain of knowing that he didn't get to realize those dreams, it made me want to double down. And I was just like, life is short, time is precious, and we have to live our life the best that we can. And so I think that experience just really impacted me and changed like my DNA in a way and made me not want to waste my time, made me not want to just like do the normal thing or the status quo if it wasn't serving me well, you know, if I wasn't feeling like I was living life. And so, yeah, it helped me kind of see things a little bit more outside the box, or at least be like pushed to do things more outside of the box. And so I think I followed the traditional, like, okay, I was a PA, and then I had my own practice, and I found it very lonely at times. I was an independent contractor for a group, seeing clients, and they kind of helped encourage it as well, because they were super supportive of the idea of me not commuting to Orange County hours and hours a week. So they really helped.
Wonderful. Yeah. I love how your own, like, unfortunately, like, suffering, but how you allowed that suffering to shape your future. It's like this, I mean, I just kind of got the chills as you were sharing that, of like your brother is like living on and how you live your life. And
thank you for saying that.
So beautiful.
I love that idea, the way you said it. I think when we go through hardship, as we all do, obviously it sucks and we need to grieve and mourn and do all the things, but I love that if there's something we can get out of a really tough situation, that we can let it have some sort of positive impact on us. And so I think, honestly, at the time, I wasn't thinking like, what's the way for me to make meaning out of this? I was just like, how can I survive? How can I get through this? And now I look back and I'm super grateful, obviously, because that most painful, tragic thing in my life has now been kind of the, what's the word? Like, the start, the
North Star?
Yeah, kind of the North Star that's like moved me to do what I've done now. Obviously one step at a time, but yeah, so I feel really grateful.
I'm so grateful, and like everything, you know, sometimes like obviously on social media you get the like curated, like the best version of everyone. But like you really have done all these things. Like it's like, you know, sometimes you're like, you see someone on social media and you're like, are they actually doing that? And like, but like Teresa's doing it. Like I've been staying in here for a week and I'm just like, Teresa, you're amazing. How are you doing all this stuff? And you're seeing your clients, but like living her life, like such a vibrant.
We're having a good time, aren't we?
Social life and traveling and just letting people interrupt you in a way that feels like it aligns with your goals and values. It's just like you're doing all the things.
That's the thing. I think the values piece is really huge for me. I think one thing that like can suck your soul is when you're living a life where it's not aligned with your values. And I think for me, I'm really grateful that I just feel like I was forced to make sure life fit my values. And so, yeah, the idea of having 2 weeks of vacation a year feels like so horrible, and not the way I want to live life. I want to be able to live it fully. I want to go on adventures. I want to feel freedom. Freedom, I think, is one of my biggest values. And so, yeah, I'm grateful that I get to do this. And I wish if I could share with people, like, the message I would give them is, like, it's not as hard as you think it is. Like, it's totally doable to do this.
Yes. It's totally doable, but this, like, there has to be some level of, like, I'm going to do this even if there's hard things. And, like, we've had, like, the pushback or, like, we don't do that. And many naysayers along the way, I imagine potentially still, even if it's like kind of glamorous at the same time. So I feel like that feels worth saying because Teresa's like, you can do it. It's totally possible. And it is so true.
Well,
But
now
like,
people know because I think the
overly-
pandemic kind of like made it so that people were forced to practice remotely and they were more open to the idea. So now I feel like people get it, but I don't know. I kind of notice, I'm curious if you feel this way, Marie, because you work with so many therapists. I feel like sometimes we're the most afraid to do things outside of the traditional way or the norm. And I wish we weren't.
I know. And why can't we model that for our clients? And you're right. There's like, it's more of a thing now to like be a digital nomad or like travel the world. All that. So you're saying it's doable, but I'm thinking of like whatever the thing is that for each person, because not everyone's going to be a digital nomad. I would be a terrible digital nomad. I'm so...
You're doing it this week. You're doing it this week.
It's a week of the year. I can just sort of like pretend for a week and enjoy it and then go back home and like be so chill. But so like not everyone is going to be a digital nomad. I mean, some people, if you want to be, go for the gold. But like the idea of like what really matters to me and what are my values and then can I actually pursue that? And that's going to be a different thing for everybody. But a lot of times it's going to feel like, oh, but I don't have any like maybe role models or friends or people in my community doing that. So like, I guess I can't. And I think that that was the part that was kind of sticking with me as you were talking of like, yeah, maybe, but like at least ask, like, can I?
I think that's actually one of the reasons people don't do it more, and one of the questions people ask me the most when they like see me and go, oh my gosh, I want to do what you're doing, is they're like, you know, they want to know the how. They want to know exactly how. And I think one obstacle that people run into is there's nowhere you're going to find like a book or a rule that says you are allowed to do this.
Yeah.
And there's probably reasons for that. But I think that's what makes it so hard, is that we are not given permission professionally to like embrace a lifestyle like this because it's a little bit outside the box and maybe some people don't like that very much. And so I do think it's helpful to see people who are doing it so that we can emulate that too.
Yeah. And see people doing it in a way that's still supporting their clients' well-being, making sure, obviously this supports your well-being, which is an important part, I think, of being ethical and kind of being your best for your clients.
Yeah, well, actually, that's my whole thing, is like that phrase, being your best for your clients. I know that when I'm, like, obviously, as therapists, we're humans. We're going to have times where we feel all the feelings and are going through all the human things. But I know that when I'm my best, when I feel full of life, when I feel energized, I can give my best to my clients. And so for me, this is what my best looks like. And I just have to say, too, I feel really fortunate because my clients are amazing and they're so supportive. And whenever I meet with a new client, I give them a little bit of a spiel in terms of how I live my life, because I want to explain to them, like, you're going to see my background change sometimes. You know, sometimes I'm going to change my schedule a little bit because my hours will be a bit different. And one thing that's so encouraging is they're so supportive. Like, they're like, oh my God, I love that. I'm so inspired by that. And so that's kind of a cool thing to connect with them on, in that they know a little bit more about me than just the blank slate. Right. And they help me embrace it too. And they're so supportive. Like when we have a technical difficulty, which happens, unfortunately.
I think we all have those.
So way more than I wish I did. But like, they're so patient and supportive and kind. And I'm grateful, because I do think the clients make a big difference in terms of how possible this is.
You kind of touched on a few things that have been sticking with me the last couple of years, like the idea of like being in a box as a therapist. Like there's one way to be a therapist or do therapy, kind of the blank slate thing. Don't let your clients know anything pretty much about you at all. And I get we need some boundaries, so we're not just like gabbing about, you know, everything we got going on with our clients, but like the idea of kind of equalizing the relationship, even though we're clearly the one that's offering some sort of support and not the other way around, but like we're operating as equals. And I think that piece is something I feel like I'm just only starting to learn about that, but it feels so like transformational. Like there's a radical shift to me, I think, and hopefully I think in our whole profession, but like I know internally for me, like, wait, that thing that we were taught of like blank slate and like don't let them know anything about yourself and like stay within this is what a therapist does and this is what it looks like. It doesn't look like living in Portugal and seeing your clients in California and like, you know, don't mess with the status quo. Like that's kind of the vibe that I think it was there, and like maybe there's some pushback.
I for sure think that when we went, because we went to school around the same time, I think when we went to school, we were taught like, you are not a person, like you are a therapist, you're an object. And I see it evolving, at least in terms of the conversation on social media. I'm actually really curious for people who are like students is that changing in school? Because it is so healing and liberating. And one of the things I've experienced is when I do share my humanness with my clients, or if I self-disclose something, obviously with intention that is supportive to them, they're so grateful, and that you feel this connection get deeper. And I mean, it is like a bit of a nuance. Like, we don't know always where that line is. Yeah. For example, I'm not an eat in front of my clients kind of therapist. I know some therapists are, no judgment for that, but it just makes me feel a little bit weird to do that. But I just overall think this idea of us being human, embracing our humanity and showing that to clients is the way forward.
If you had an hour, I would want to hear like the hour-long version of that, because I'm just so interested in that, and I feel like you do that really well.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like it's new though for me too, like you said. Yeah.
Well, and even like the idea you're saying, like sometimes even if you put yourself out there a little, like maybe you think maybe the self-disclosure might be helpful, but you're not totally sure. And even if it's like a bit of a hiccup, like that moment where you kind of have a with your client, like I feel like that's just such a good opportunity to like model, like, oh, how do we navigate this now? Yeah. And this is how two people can navigate, like, oh, I said something and maybe that wasn't quite what you needed, and so let's rectify it. And it's still like that fear of like, I have to get it just perfect, and what if my self-disclosure is like not the perfect thing that they needed in that moment. I used to carry, I mean I still do, but like really I used to carry that a lot, and like to let some of it go and say, even if it's a little bit off, like we'll fix it, and that'll be an opportunity.
Well, that's one of my favorite things to do now in terms of like how I show my humanity is I'll say like, all right, I'm about to say something and I'm not sure if this is going to be helpful or not. Yes. Or I'm not 100% sure if I should say this, so let me know if this doesn't land with you.
I do like almost the exact same thing.
Okay. And they appreciate it, right? Like they're just like, oh, okay. And you kind of feel your client lean in to that moment. Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to pivot because I have to ask this question.
Yes.
I'm just so we've been talking about this. So I kind of want to see what you have to say. Yeah. Now that you've been here for 5 years, you are very much an international citizen in a way. Let's say you're not embedded in sort of U.S. culture and like U.S. therapist culture. I'm just wondering, now that you've kind of seen more of the world, if you have any kind of reactions or thoughts to kind of how you look now at, being a psychologist in the U.S. or the state of California, and like how does that compare, contrast to like how people do it, and like what therapy looks like everywhere else.
Yes, I have so many feelings.
Okay, bring it on. I want to hear whatever you have to say.
Yeah, I think there are concrete advantages and disadvantages to being a therapist in the USA. I think one of the advantages we have is that we have access to amazing education, and for whatever reason, when it comes to social media presence, I feel like Americans have this disproportionate advantage. I don't know if it's the algorithm or whatever, but our voices are heard to a greater degree in the global conversation.
You think like U.S.-based social media content 100%. Is promoted more internationally than...
Absolutely. Like,
so fascinating.
For big accounts, people who are big influencers in this space in the USA, they're just globally known. And as opposed to someone from a smaller country, let's say Latvia, which has 2 million, I have a Latvian friend, so this is on my mind, which has 2 million people in the country. They just don't have the same, even if they were doing amazing stuff, they don't get the same amount of exposure. So I think we're very fortunate in that way that we get to have this ability to lead a conversation or to influence for better. So that's a good thing. I love that. And I think there are so many frustrations. I think one of my biggest frustrations with how we're licensed as psychologists is that we have this state-based licensure, which to me feels so antiquated. And one thing I've learned is that therapists all over the world from other countries do not have this. So, for example, my colleagues who are English, we have Dr. Sofa, a friend of ours who's in the UK, she can practice with clients all over the world, and we cannot do that. So it directly puts us at a disadvantage because we're not able to serve clients who are interested in working with us. I have it happen all the time. A client from a different country, a different state, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, and we have to do this whole song and dance of trying to find them another therapist, and it's, if you've been there, it's really annoying. But also really makes it hard for us to grow our business, harder for us to grow our businesses. So yeah, I don't get why this is still a thing. I think we need to look to other countries, and if they're able to do this, to let their psychologists practice in a more global sense, I think we need to think more globally as well. And it's not just for money. It's not just for being able to work with more clients, but it's so that we're able to have a greater positive impact in the ways that we want to in the world. Yeah. And so I think writing is like one of the ways I think we can still have a positive influence outside of the USA, because books are so able to be translated and shared around the world. But just the fact that, like, to this day, I still only work with clients in California, and I'm grateful that I have a practice that can manage that way. But what if a therapist is new and they're trying to build and they happen to have other people interested in working with them? The fact that they can't is super frustrating to me. Yeah. So I have strong feelings about this one. Hopefully I'm not alone.
I was going to say, I know you're not the only one. At the very least, it's an N of 2. I feel the same. It's just like, and the amount of frustration I felt is just only increasing. Because it's not like it's new even since the pandemic. No. Like, this has been something people have been talking about. I mean, I was like doing a little Googling after some of our earlier conversations. Like, there's been people since like 2012 and prior advocating for like opening up our licensure so that we can see people in other places. Because there's just more access, more options. And there's a precedent for it that like other countries are doing it differently. We're the weird ones in the U.S. And like, we're doing it differently than everyone else.
I do want to say we are like, there is a bit of that moving in that direction because there's that side pact thing.
I know, but California. Yes. Listen, I know sometimes people leave that comment in my videos like, just join SciPact. I'm like, California, it's a. I don't have any words.
Come on, California.
Let's get on it.
But also, SciPact is limited to obviously just a few states, and it's also kind of a hassle. Like, when I look at how people have to navigate that, it's still super difficult. It's not as seamless as it should be. And oh my God, the biggest reason too is therapists able to serve more people around the world. Obviously, that increases access to people who need therapists. And we've been in this shortage of therapists for so long. So I do think it's a bit of an access issue as well. To democratize like the access to therapy. Is that the right word? Democratize the access? Anyway, you guys get what I mean.
We're tracking.
Yeah, just to make it easier for people from all backgrounds and wherever they live to get the help they need.
Yeah. So Therese, as an expert, or someone with way more experience in some of these things than I certainly have, we're just riffing. This is just us and our opinions and thoughts, not professional advice per se. But what do you think? Disclaimer. What do you think the future of therapy looks like? Whatever you want that question to mean.
Yeah, I think that, like, when I think about the future of what I hope this field is and what I hope the lives of therapists are, I hope that there's a lot less burnout, obviously. So that we've created a culture that supports the well-being and the thriving of therapists better. I think the medical field needs to do this too. And I think that includes how we train therapists, the cost of the programs so that people can become therapists, and all of the hours involved. I think, I'm not saying that, how many hours it should be, but I think that process for so many people is so difficult and very limiting for people who need to work, earn money, live their lives. So I think those things need to change. We need to make it easier for people to become therapists. And more accessible for people to become therapists. So I think that's a whole training internship situation change. Yeah. I see that the American system of psychologists and therapists is going to also evolve, I hope, and that we'll be able to practice with people from all over the world, that they will find a system where states can communicate, maybe a centralized way of licensing so that there's still accountability, obviously, we need that, but that we're also able to expand our borders and our horizons as we practice. I hope that they encourage us to practice with people from around the world and that our training evolves to make us better as international practitioners, especially for people who are in private practice. And yeah, I think overall just more streamlining and communication will be great. I would be so happy if therapists, if like the norm became therapists who did things like me, who were able to travel and explore the world while they practice, only because I know my quality of life has changed so much. And my tagline for so many years was build a life you don't need a vacation from. And I think that is such a gift and a privilege for people who can do it. So I would love if more people could do that. If you could just, if you were dreaming of going to Japan, that you could just say, yeah, I can go to Japan and I can keep working if I need to, to do both and not have to, because therapists get hurt twice, right? So we don't see our clients and then we're like spending all the money for travel and everything. So
Right.
I would love if it was just easier for us to explore the world and live life. These are some of the things that are coming to my mind. What do you think? Like, I want to know what you think.
I mean, everything you just said, I feel like if I could summarize the theme of what you just said is just access.
Yeah.
Like therapist access to getting the training we need to be therapists.
Yeah.
And then access to like our clients accessing therapy, and then us being able to access like the kind of freedom to, if we want to travel the world, we can. And if we're more of a homebody like Marie, that we can.
Yeah, but more streamlining to support that for sure. Like I feel like we need the governing bodies that be, the powers that be to help streamline things to make these things more possible for us.
I agree.
Please.
And so I would echo that, everything you just said. Yes, all the snaps. And then I think the things that I'm thinking about are in the realm of like how therapy, like the session, the structure of like the therapy itself, I feel like it's also feeling a little bit outdated. Like, and I know I'm like on that edge of like, I love being a therapist so much and like living very much within the sort of prescribed confines of what therapy is supposed to be and like doing that with my clients, and I still love it so much. But I think there's some, and I can't, I'm not going to be the like person on the frontier of this, but I love like hearing from people and learning from people that I think are just like calling out like the archaic and sometimes like directly harmful systems that this profession is built on. And we're like trying to, keep the parts that are good and sort of be like, wait, which parts do we not want to keep with us? And I feel like I need to consult with other people and like learn to know what those are. But I just find that like it's got to change. Like something's going to change. And as far as kind of like, I'm the therapist, and like I know what you need, and this is your diagnosis, and this you need
like a very
to do
Western,
this.
right? A very Western kind of maybe patriarchal-ish.
Oh, not maybe, not maybe.
Okay, yeah, but the system it needs to evolve. Maybe that's the word. Like, I'm sorry, am I interrupting? I just think like evolution, like in some circles of therapists, I know people have asked questions about why they should keep their license or why shouldn't they just switch into a model that's labeled under life coaching. And I think these questions, while they may seem threatening to those of us who have benefited from the current system as it is, they're important questions to ask. And I think this is why our field needs to evolve, because people are starting to ask really good questions like, why should I only practice in one state? Like, help make sense of this, right? And so, I think our field needs to evolve. And listen, we're supposed to be fueled by research and by moving the conversation forward. And honestly, I think one thing that I notice a lot is that we seem antiquated. We seem stuck in the past, right? We're working in our practices today on things that were studied in research 20 years ago. And we need to close that gap and be able to integrate that stuff more. So it's all about efficacy too, right? Like actually just doing our jobs better. Yeah.
Providing good care for our clients.
Yeah, I feel like I just went off right there, but
I was hoping you would go there. And I think it's like even having the freedom to say the words. I know that so many people feel similarly, but this kind of like and I think to kind of give voice to like why we can sometimes be so stuck for those of us who really mean well, we really want to do our best. It could feel like, am I even allowed to like question the way that it is? Because I don't want to mess up. I want to do the right thing. I want to be a good therapist. Here's this kind of prescribed model of what that is. So like, I'm going to do that because that's what I know is best. And so is it okay to kind of ask questions or look for a different way to improve things? And I think that's kind of what, I mean, I'm just speaking even from my own history of like, I want to speak up because I don't want to like mess it up. I don't want to
We're rule followers over here, so like whenever I break the slightest rule, I'm like, ugh. But I'm grateful for people again through social media that I've learned about. I know you're reading some books to like expand your viewpoints as well, but I'm grateful for people out there who have the courage to even say these things and lead the conversation and ask the questions, because it feels a little scary to do that sometimes. It feels like I'm going to get in trouble for wondering about the benefits of licensure. I'm going to get in trouble for not wanting to do it the way things have always been done. So I'm grateful there's a lot of voices now that are getting more exposure so we can learn from them, or at least just, again, ask the questions.
Just having the freedom to ask questions,
Yeah.
which to me is just such an important part of freedom of speech.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and whatever answers you find are the answers, but just like asking questions. We can ask questions.
But why does it feel like you're bad if you do something? You know, I feel like people can look at us funny and be like, well, why are you questioning the way that we've always done things?
I know.
It sounds so old school. I don't like it.
I mean, we could trail off, and it may or may not be helpful. We
could definitely trail off.
totally trail off on that one. We're just we'll let that one float around for y'all to think about. Okay, I have 2 questions that I want to squeeze in, especially because you talked about, like, if there's books out there.
Yes.
Favorite books?
Marie, I love this question. I really, really am. This is not a traditional therapist book, but I am a huge fan of Matt Haig, a UK-based author who wrote books like Reasons to Stay Alive, The Midnight Library, and what's beautiful about Matt. Hi, Matt, by the way. We're connected on Instagram, so I'm a big fan of his. He knows. But what I love about Matt is that as a human being, he's just a beautiful person. He talks a lot about his own struggles with mental health, including, you know, he struggled with wanting to die by suicide for a long chunk of his life. And he talks a lot about hanging on and that there will be better days. And that obviously means a lot to me personally and professionally. And he's this man that has like a beautiful family, and now he's traveling the world promoting his latest book. So it's just very inspiring, him as a person. Yeah. But his books always ask questions about the human experience, like what it means to be human, how we navigate through struggle and hardship, and that the things that are difficult in life don't have to define us. There's so much more I could say about him, but all his books are amazing. I still have a few more on my wish list of his that I need to read, but just I'm constantly inspired by his writing. So I love him. You haven't read him yet?
No, I have to read that. Like, genuinely, it was a question for me.
Yeah.
Okay, and also...
Yes.
Did you guys know that Therese is a published author? I was like...
Thanks, Marie.
What have you written about, Therese?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of writing a book called Love the Journey with my friends at Bandeau. They're an amazing company that makes all sorts of health and wellness and joy promoting things, including journals, books, but also like cute apparel and stuff like that. I love them. I've followed them for years, actually, before I got this opportunity. Yeah. And so Love the Journal is a workbook, a beautiful workbook featuring artwork from 8 artists, women, mostly women of color from all around the world. I'm very proud of that. And the book is an invitation to shift away from focusing on the end point and always like reaching the goal of the destination, and instead asking questions and inviting you to reflect on what helps you feel fully alive in the day-to-day. So it's very much like a passion project for me, in that it's a conversation that means a lot to me. How can we love life every day as much as possible, even when there's hardship, even when things don't go the way that we plan on? And I love that we've created this beautiful book that like I've shared with clients and I've given to friends, and it's kind of like you get to journal in this thing that's also beautiful and a work of art. And the pages tear out as well, so you can like take them with you. But yeah, there's a workbook and a journal, and I'm very proud of it. It took almost 2 years to finish it.
That's wild.
It was a journey. Yeah.
Okay. Did you love the journey?
Sometimes I love the journey. Sometimes it was hard. But the end result I am very proud of.
Yes, Therese did work very hard. I can attest to that. Closing thoughts. Favorite thing about living in Lisbon?
Oh, I love so many things about living in Lisbon. I would say my favorite thing about living in Lisbon is that I get to live most of my life without a car. Remember I was talking about like the 4 hours in the car? I don't even own a car anymore. So most of my friends live within a 15-minute walk. I can walk to restaurants and cafes and even take my friends to all the touristy things. It's such a beautiful, walkable place, and just being able to walk through the city, you experience it so much differently than being in your car. I would say that's a very big perk of living here. There's a million other things, but having no car is one of them.
You know, I wasn't expecting you to say that one. I thought you were going to say something lovely about the culture, which I know you have a list of things you could say. But that's the top one. It does make, once you said it, it makes sense to say you went 180 from like 4 hours commute a day to like, I don't even have the option of a 4-hour commute because there's no car.
Well, and that the carb thing is part of the culture in a way, because I think one thing I'm very grateful for is that Portuguese culture was an invitation to me to slow down and to focus on things that really matter. And I have a deep, deep love for the Portuguese people because I feel so grateful to be a guest in this country and to live in this beautiful, sunny place that's just offers so much. But I think they've kind of got their priorities a bit more aligned than the American culture. So people here move a little bit slower and they'll take time to have conversations with you. The other day, someone was talking about how they got their bag fixed at a local market stall. Like some guy was working with leather and he fixed her bag and then didn't charge her for it. Just said, nope, it's okay. You just take it. And I just thought, oh, this is why I love Portugal, because things like that happen more here. So I could go on and on. But yes, the culture is also amazing, but grateful that it allows me to slow down and not have to like be fast and get everywhere fast.
I have very much enjoyed that while being here as well. And Therese, thank you for hosting me. Thank you for filming with me, sharing your wisdoms from around the world.
Best. It's been so fun having you. And yeah, thanks for the conversation. It's fun to talk about these things because I feel like we don't always get the opportunity. And yeah, some of the like more like the conversations that therapists I think are starting to have more of but haven't been having, I think we got to have today. So yes, thank you, Marie.
Getting the word out. Thank you, Therese. You're the best. And if you're not following Therese and all the socials, I'll link to everything we talked about.
Please follow me. Please.
You can find her. What's the name of your brand?
Exploring Therapy. So on Instagram, it's @exploring.therapy, and it's also Dr. Therese Mascardo on YouTube.
Yes, and you get to just follow Therese all around the world. So if you're a homebody like me, you can just imagine that you're traveling.
Or we can be friends and you can visit me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, Therese.
Thanks,
Is there
Marie.
anything else you wanted to say?
No, you're the best.
You're the best.
We have so much fun.
Thank you, Therese, for that wonderful interview. I appreciate Dr. Therese on so many levels. Like, I just feel like I've just been fangirling over her for years, and I can't believe that she's my friend. So all the gratitude, all the thanks, Dr. Therese, and I know that this episode has some lovely tidbits for you all to have some takeaways from as well. And before we close, I'd like to thank therapynotes.com for sponsoring this video. Therapy Notes helps with all of your practice management needs, from scheduling to notes to billing. They have a HIPAA-secure telehealth platform built in for all users, and so much more. If you'd like to check out Therapy Notes, you can get 2 months to try it for free with no commitment just by clicking the link in the description of this video. Well, I hope you found this interview supportive and maybe even a bit thought-provoking. I've linked to everything we discussed in the description of today's episode, and until next time. I forgot that Teresa and I already said that, so I'll put that here. Thank you, Therese, and until next time, from 2 therapists to another. We're just gonna go there. I wish you well. That was like the corniest thing.
Thanks, guys.
Yay! Oh, Therese.
I'm sweating so hard right now. It's not because I'm nervous. It's because, whoa.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you, Marie.
You're amazing.